Hello everyone, how y'all doing? So today I actually wanted to discuss something that could potentially be good news, or in general I would say it's just positive overall, which is in regards to this new job posting that EA shared. Now, everyone and their grandma knows that when it comes to gaming, one of the biggest things that's holding back Linux is mainly with anti-cheat. It's the fact that a lot of games they go out of the way to not support Linux mainly because a lot of their anti-cheat requires a certain level of invasiveness that's just either isn't possible on Linux, or even if it was, it would require some additional just additional research and understanding of the overall OS that in general just Linux just doesn't have a big enough market share for them to really care. And honestly, I do still think that this is going to continue to become a problem. But even with that said, there is still some hope. Like, for example, this posting here where EA are looking for a senior anti cheat engineer. Um, Here they are mainly highlighting the fact that they want to expand their support on the ARM64 architecture, which I think in general they're looking into, because I don't know how the anti cheat problem really persists when it comes to Windows on ARM. With a lot of with the Snapdragon CPUs. I don't know exactly how anti-cheat works there, because I do know that they're like using like some layers of emulation or compatibility. I think it's mostly emulation in order to get a lot of Windows games to run on those Windows on ARM laptops. And so I have to imagine that, as Windows tries to push more for Windows on ARM, I'm sure, developers are going to become a little bit more cautious about how to improve the general cheating situation there. And so I would have to imagine that in general, that's kind of what they're looking for. But if you scroll down just a little bit, right. Wait, where is it? There it is. Um, Chart a path for EA Javelin Entity to support additional OS and hardware in the future, such as Linux and Proton. Now, this is really cool because we all know that the EA anti cheat doesn't work on Linux. In fact, it's not just that, there's like for example, this error here with My Hero the Rumble. I don't know if this is still happening, but it was only just a few weeks ago when it started showing the no anti-cheat model error. Now the thing is, this is mostly just a bad update. There probably is a way that they can get this matter fixed by just some kind of patch to be deployed. Like, because I've seen this happen before. I think this also happened with Virtual Fighter 5. So I do think that this problem is not. I don't think this is intentional. I think this is just negligence. But when it comes to EA, a lot of the times when a game just doesn't work on Linux, they'll just outright tell you, yeah, the reason why you're not able to play is because you're running this on either Wine or Proton. We don't support that shit. Get out of here. That's just always how the E anti-cheat always worked. Which is a shame, because like that was a very clear like gate that they were putting to essentially not allow Linux players to play. And seeing this, and there's even bonus skills previously shipped anti-cheat solutions on Linux. So it seems like EA are interested in expanding the support to Linux, which I think is really cool. And while I don't think this is gonna fix because I was looking into the Are We Anti Cheat Yet website, and I decided to look for results specific to EA Anti Cheat, and there's in total 18 games that have the EA anti cheat and prevent Linux users from being able to play them. Um, Overall, it's not a big number when you look into the borked and denied section, and so you know maybe we're not gonna see like a huge percentage of games finally getting supported, and even then we still don't know when exactly that's gonna happen. But still, 18 games, assuming that those games are gonna get supported on Linux after they decide to enable whatever support they want to, that's still 18 games. Like that's still 18 games, some of which are like, well, I hate to say this, but like some of them are like sports games, and we all know sports games are very popular. And so yeah, I think this is just overall a good move. Now I will say one thing though is that this does give me hope, but I'm not entirely sure how much are they gonna double down on this, because at the end of the day, the NTG situation on Linux is not an easy one to fix, mainly because the main issue with Linux and the reason why developers choose not to support Linux is mainly just the fact that um, the anti-cheat solutions that a lot of developers go with are kernel level, meaning they install like borderline ring zero drivers into the actual OS that essentially, allows them to detect any cheats that may be running on a much deeper, level on the system. And so if it detects that there's any like malicious software that's tampering with the game, then them being in the kernel space allows them to better monitor the activity. And the problem is Proton, the the most privileged Proton can ever be is user space. It never actually goes to kernel space, meaning that any software that runs under Proton is just never gonna reach the kernel space. And because of that, a lot of these kernel level anti-cheats, just by the mere design of Proton, are just not really gonna elevate to that point where it's accessing the Linux kernel. It's just not really gonna happen. This is one of those things where I feel like there's only really two solutions. Well, I guess maybe three. The first one is just they don't enable the entity to run at a kernel level, and it mostly runs in user space. If that's something that they're willing to go with, that's fine. I don't mind it. I actually don't like it when entities run in that level anyway, but is that something that they want? Probably not. But I guess that is something that they can consider. Is like if they legitimately cannot go to that level, then they just open an exception for Linux, which I think they already kind of do with some. At least some games already kind of do that with Macs anyway, because anti cheats on Mac also can't go into kernel space, and so they have to compromise. And so I don't know. Maybe they'll make that exception with Linux, but I'm not entirely sure. So that's one thing they could do. The second thing is they could develop a native version of their anti cheat for Linux, and the problem is, while they can do that, I'm not sure if they're really gonna bother to, like, for example, here in this situation, they're specifically mentioning Proton, which does make me believe that I don't think they're currently considering going native with their anti-cheat software. So I don't think that's gonna happen. Like I just don't think they see Linux. I don't think they see the Linux community as big enough for them to like hire people to just, in which their entire task is to actively maintain the Linux version of their anti-cheat. I don't think that's something that they'll really be interested in doing it. And so the other option would just simply be to migrate more into server-sided anti-cheat, which technically speaking, I think they already do this to some degree. It's just that server-sided anti-cheat, at least from their perspective, is not like as reliable as I guess more native client-sided anti-cheat, at least from their perspective. There are some games that go almost full server-sided, and to them, I've seen mixed results, but I like to believe that at least when it comes to Linux, that is the future. And I don't know if EA is considering that, but that's what I would say is that I'm glad I am seeing this job posting, but I'm still not entirely sure if they're gonna go too hard into supporting Linux if at the end of the day they end up reaching the same conclusion that they're currently reaching, which is that unless they're able to get their anti-cheat to run at a kernel level, then it's not really worth it to support Linux. But I will say though that well, right now it's kind of bad timing because of the RAM apocalypse shit, but assuming that the Steam machine comes out and a lot of people end up buying it and more people start to, migrate into the SteamOS ecosystem, and with the Steam machine in specific, because of the fact that that's a little bit closer to, well, I wouldn't exactly call that like a console necessarily, but it's much closer to a console living room experience than any PC usually is. And assuming that enough people are gonna buy that machine, which at the end of the day, regardless of the current situations with RAM. When you look back at the Steam Deck, that thing came out around the time when there were like GPU shortages and just chip shortages in general, and so you know I think and just the scalping situation, whatever. And so I don't know. I think there's still some hope that maybe the Steam machine, maybe Valve can find a way to make this a successful run, even within the current circumstance. Of course, if they do want to delay because of the because of the whole market situation, I wouldn't blame them. But but let's just assume that the Steam machine ends up being a big thing. Maybe not as big as like a PS5 or anything, but still, like it ends up selling a fair amount of like units. I feel like if it gets to that point, it's gonna become a little bit more difficult for video game developers to make the excuse that Linux is too small, because with the Steam Deck, especially with like first person shooters, maybe you could argue that it's a handheld and like a lot of people are usually not really playing those types of competitive shooters on a handheld. But with the Steam machine being a bit more console like, as well as being more PC like, because it is a sole dedicated machine where you can connect the controller, but you can also connect mice and keyboard. And I'm sure there's probably going to be a lot of people that are going to play this as if it were a PC. Continuing to ignore that audience might become a little bit harder to justify. Again, I don't know how much this is going to contribute to the market share of Linux, but I have to imagine that EA may be anticipating that however much it ends up growing, maybe it's going to get to a point where it's going to become harder for them to ignore that. And that's why right now they're hiring people who have experience with Linux. And if that's the case, then I fully support them. And honestly, hopefully EA is not the only one. Like, hopefully, like if it ever gets to a point where EA Entity starts to support Linux, I hope that other Entity developers start to follow up on this. I mean, technically speaking, like things like BattleEye and Easy Entities, they do support Linux. It's just that the version of they don't support, like they don't have the same, again, they don't have the same access to the system as they do on Windows. And that's why even if they technically do work on Linux, at least a variant of those entities work on Linux, not every developer may choose to enable that support if they don't really think it's worth it. If they think that there's a risk of cheating increasing to a level where it doesn't justify them satisfying the Linux community, then obviously this is still going to continue to become a problem. But hopefully, if EA starts to like care a bit more about the Linux community, then hopefully everyone else follows up. Who knows? Maybe Ricochet might decide to post a job offering, hoping to get people who have experience with Linux. I don't know. Like, I'm very interested. Like, this is a pretty interesting news. I hope to see more of this, and yeah, and hopefully, because at the end of the day, I'm a single player dude. So, this kind of games don't really matter to me, but it matters to a lot of people. And if this becomes less of an issue, then I feel like in general, it's gonna make everyone happy, because it means that more games are supported on Linux, more people can play them. The market share increases, and who knows, maybe over time, other software vendors, not even just gaming related, might think, oh, this Linux shit might low key be worth it, and they start putting their programs, and even more people are happy. So, yeah, I think this is overall good news, and yeah, I hope to see more of this. Anyway, that's all I want to share.